I didn't trust myself. Like, shit, like what were all these experiences that I had? So bye, like all of it.
Right.
By God, by Jesus, by any sort of spirituality. And then the second book that really changed my view on possibilities would be something called Messages from Masters. But it did help me to have more hope in this connection with my higher self, because I wasn't there yet. I still didn't trust anything. I still didn't know what to believe, but it was kind of, it planted a seed. Okay, maybe we do have powers, upward. Yeah. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Confessions from the Outside. This is a podcast about finding purpose and happiness after an identity crisis. We're going to explore how to live with intention after major life changes. This is Shawnee, I'm Ty, and what are we going to talk about today?
Today, we are going to talk about how we found our versions of spirituality after leaving religion. And I think it's fair to say, like, divorce, too. I mean, that was such a big part of it. So just kind of how we established a new set of beliefs.
For those of you who are new here, both of us grew up in the Mormon religion. This is a really high demand religion. And most people don't understand the trauma you go through as you leave this. And I know we talk about this in almost every podcast. It actually wasn't our intention, but it's becoming apparent how much it has encompassed and like affected our lives.
Right.
And I know for me, as I was leaving, in order to find what I believed in, I had to dump it all. I had to dump God. I had to dump everything because I just couldn't believe anything. But I want to hear first what you started with. Like, what was your in to maybe start your beliefs?
I'm glad you asked. My experience was very different. I didn't dump it all. In fact, I started to read and do research and find out that we were fed a lot of lies and we were not given the whole truth about the history of the church and all the things. And so as I dismantled all of that, I started to kind of reconstruct it in a way that made sense to me, because that's what I needed at the time. I couldn't just dump it all, because that would have just pulled the rug out from under me and I would have been just in this unknown space. And I don't know. I don't know how I would have handled it, honestly. Yeah. So I kept parts of it and made sense of it in a way like where I was able, and I still hold this same belief that religion is just a different framework for the same belief that a lot of people have. They just have different ways of presenting it or teaching it.
Do you think that the difference between you and I in that way was because I kind of never truly identified with it and you, like, it was more part of your identity to you? Do you think maybe that's part of the reason you kept some of it?
It could be just that, I mean, that was my total identity. But I think also that I wanted to believe that there was a God. And if I just threw everything out at once, I didn't know where to start from there. But I remember specifically at the time I was listening to a podcast that was supposed to be more about psychology, but this podcast host was like a spiritual psychologist. So she kind of mixed the two together, where she would talk about all things psychology, but she would also teach about like spirituality. And I remember her saying something. I just remember it is like this memory is like imprinted in my brain. I'll never forget it. Being in my bedroom with my earphones, my AirPods. I don't remember what they were, but I was listening with my earphones, and her saying something about in religion, they teach God as being something separate from you rather than you, a part of you. And that just, I remember, I don't know, it was like my sacral opening up or what, but my stomach literally did something where I was like, it just felt like it resonated. It felt like truth. I'm like, wow, I didn't think about it that way. So basically the concept of the universe, we're all one, we're all like basically source energy having a human experience, right?
Yeah.
But just those words. And so then I started to look into spirituality more, and so much of it made sense. And I was, and did just like low key research on religious the history of religion and the progression of it and just how it's changed over time and just how there's so many similarities. They just change things to be this, or like, the Roman Church taking over and blah, 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 all of the politics of it. But I was able to draw parallels between my religion and spirituality. And, but, definitely saw this religion as based upon a lie and being tainted and things like that. But anyway,
that's so funny that you say low key, because we're not supposed to. We were not supposed to look at outside sources at all, because, if anything talked about the history in a negative light, we were told that it was from the adversary. It was from the devil. Like,
right.
If it made you have any sort of cognitive dissonance, then that bad feeling is not your higher self. It's actually like evil.
How's that for control?
So, no.
Don't look at that. That's from the devil.
When she's saying low key, you probably were being very cautious.
Well, sorry. I was in a way, because it did feel like I was doing something bad or wrong. But I more meant I can't go into all of the history of religion because I didn't thoroughly study it. Oh, I gotcha. But just religion in general, Christianity, everything, how it's kind of evolved over time. But enough that I understand, that there's so much that people don't know about their own religions and about just Christianity in general and religion and how it's evolved and changed over time and how they're basically just branches of the same core belief, but just with their different spins on it, Yeah.
So at the time, were you researching Mormonism too? Or was it just the other religions?
No, absolutely. I mean, I had already done the research at this point and been like, well, it's all a lie. We've been bamboozled. Like, Joseph Smith, you son of a bitch. Like,
son of a bitch. That's our t-shirt.
You clever son of a bitch. I mean, I honestly was like, this man was brilliant, but dirty. You know?
Right. But so what were some of the parallels and the ones that you felt like you could keep? What were some of those for you?
Well, just basically, like the Holy Ghost, for example, is taught in the Mormon religion as being something separate from you. As like this entity that you either earn its presence or you don't, or you do stuff to keep it away or not being unworthy of it. I was able to kind of take that as like, okay, I have a higher self that I'm either in tune with because of like, if I'm in my ego or whatever I'm doing, or I'm not. So I kind of saw it as like, okay, that's like an adaptation of higher self or of like being connected to source energy. It's just, like I said, been dirtied and tainted and like used as like, like you're not worthy if you don't do X, Y, and Z, and the Holy Ghost won't be with you. No, this is about growth and understanding and connecting to your higher self. But there's nothing bad about the things that you do along the way that you're learning and processing. And does that make sense?
No, I love that we have the two different experiences, because I think people are going to be able to relate to both, and it's definitely, some people may not be able to go at it my way, just throwing everything out. And so that's definitely a much gentler process. And honestly, I think I like that, because you kind of validate a lot of your experiences growing up, because you did feel things and there was bits of truth in there that you connected with, and you were able to, separate them and see which one was actually you feeling it, Right. I think that's really cool.
Well, and also I think about, the Mormon teaching of the three kingdoms, right? And that the celestial kingdom, you can become like God, like a God, and create your own worlds. And in spirituality, I mean, they teach like that we are source energy, that we are creators, So there's things that kind of make sense to me. Just like I said, religion, definitely kind of ruins it for me. In a way that it's based off of worthiness and ordinances and control and just, so much. Codependency. Just with it. I know there's a lot of people who thrive in that setting and that framework. And, but obviously I did not. And all of this, stuff with spirituality, all of these understandings and teachings just made so much more sense to me, and they resonated. So it was kind of interesting because I thought I had it I had it down. I thought I understood it. I thought I was awakened AF. Like, I honestly was like, I have it. Like, this is it, bitches, you know? But didn't really realize that there was a lot of shadow work and trauma that I had not addressed and worked through. And so I went through a period of time of understanding these concepts, thinking I had applied them, but just kind of not really doing anything with it. And then wondering, you know, why I was sad still and why my life was like feeling like it was falling apart. And
I think so many people are going to be able to relate with that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I like that you started talking about that.
I'm glad that you talked about the trauma part of it, because there was a lot that I was not grieving. Like, I was grieving, but I wasn't addressing it. I wasn't understanding how much grief I was feeling over this loss of identity, this loss of religion, this loss of community, family and friend relationships, even though I do feel like overall there were some things said and interactions and stuff that were unpleasant. But overall, it's not that I lost my family. They didn't disown me. And we both tried really hard to meet in the middle. But it still changes. It changes the dynamic. It changes the relationship. And I was not mourning that. I mean, I was, but I wasn't. I was pushing it away. I wasn't addressing it. And it's a real... some people really, really stay stuck in that space because they just lose so much.
Yeah. And we just made a TikTok about this, you know, it's in a sense, you kind of lose a relationship, even though it's still there, but now you're speaking different languages and you just don't understand each other.
It's like your whole identity is just gone in a way for me. That's how I based everything off of my upbringing, my religion, and that dynamic and that teaching of forever families, celestial families. And then to kind of feel like on the outside of that and feel misunderstood too, because something I noticed is that a lot of times when I would try to kind of express my struggle with someone who was still in the church, especially someone close to me, like a family member, I would mention how it's been hard to have lost all of that. And I had been kind of told by some people, well, you chose this. And so I found myself kind of saying that, like, I know I chose this. And then, you know, I was thinking the other day, yeah, I chose to leave, but I did not choose to be lied to about something growing up. And that's no fault to my parents. I mean, they thought they were teaching what, you know, they really truly believe it.
They're doing the right
but
thing,
I did not choose to be taught and this belief that was wrong, that was a lie. I didn't choose that.
Yeah.
And so I didn't choose any of this to find out so anyway, I would kind of like, you know, be like, I know I chose this, but it's still hard. And I think we just don't give ourselves enough grace sometimes with what we're going through.
Well, and the other thing is too, that when people have identities and they have it as part of their identity, when you decide to say that you do not believe in that anymore, that thing, that belief, they take it as you don't like a part of them. It's not, they're not separated from the religion. If you talk about concepts that you don't like in the religion, they take it personally because it is like a deep-seated, like, this is part of me. Like, you don't like part of me now? And there's a huge misunderstanding where, I mean, I followed this whole TikTok. I was looking at the comments and it was this huge disconnect with people thinking that people who leave the church are talking about them. But no, we are talking about the teachings.
The organization, the teachings, the history.
And I think that's where this disconnect comes from. People still in, people out. It's separated.
Well, and it goes both ways too. Like, people who leave really feel, because they've been there and they know the narrative that's just kind of regurgitated towards people who leave. They know what's being said about them, and not everybody. I do feel like the church, the organization, is becoming more progressive that way, where people are trying at the very least to be more understanding. But I know that when I was in, there was a set of beliefs about people who left. They're lazy. They wanted to take the easy easy way out. I saw this great meme that said, I don't know anybody that has uprooted like their whole identity, and it said so much better, but basically like this whole like psychological, like whatever, this dismantling, because they wanted to take the easy way out. And I'm like, that is so true. That is so true. Like, it's not easy, but when I was a member, that's kind of what is taught, is that people just want to go have fun, or they don't really understand the gospel, or
we never really had a testimony.
And so you know what's being said about you, and you get self-defensive for sure. And so I feel like it goes both ways. Yeah. People really internalize and personalize a lot of, it's just kind of this battle of the egos.
If you could have been there the nights that I bawled myself to sleep, and I was up until 2 a.m. trying to convince myself that what I was reading wasn't true. Like, if you could see that and feel my anguish, then maybe you would not feel that way.
Yeah,
but yeah,
right.
Anyway, I like that you've said that. Yeah. And, and I love the way that you went about it. And also, I know that the way that I needed to do it was, it's a very much like a mirror of my personality, where I'm kind of an all or nothing person. Like, I'm in this or I'm not,
Right.
And so when I started figuring out that I didn't believe any of it, I really did just have to dump everything that I believed in. It started because I just didn't trust anything anymore.
Yeah.
Or myself. That was the hard part.
Yeah.
I thought that I had these spiritual experiences that were related to the Mormon church. And so, dang, like, were those real? Was that feeling real? Was this just like the feeling that you get in a group of people that's what is that called? Do you remember where you're in sacrament? So everybody's feeling that in testimony meeting, and it creates this euphoria that I thought was the Spirit testifying to me. But really, it may have just been that group, like, euphoria.
Right. Well, short answer, when you said, was any of this real? Yes, because law of attraction is real, right? And so if you put a belief out there that it's this thing, you're going to get confirmation back the feeling. I shouldn't say that the confirmation that the church was true may not have been real, but the feeling that you wanted to receive from that was probably real, because that's what you were putting out there. That's what, and like you said, the group mentality.
Yeah.
I definitely believe that law of attraction can work in any setting with any intention. It does not prove the validity or the truthfulness of an organization.
And that's the hard part. Like, I've never found out how to trust myself the whole time, So every concept, everything that I was taught about what life is, what reality is, what I'm feeling, had this lens of through the gospel, through this codependency in God, where, if my feelings went against something that they taught, then I'm wrong. There's something I'm doing wrong. I'm not worthy enough. I'm not praying hard enough. I'm not studying it out, Pray harder till you get the right answer. And so, yeah, I didn't trust myself. Like, shit, like, what were all these experiences that I had? So bye, like, all of it.
Right.
By God, by Jesus, by any sort of spirituality, anything that's not concrete. And this is where some people land. Some people leave religion, and it's very understandable that that's where they're at. They're absolutely. Like, I will never believe anything again that I don't see with my eyes. Yeah. If you cannot prove it with science, then, and it's a very understandable reaction, and very valid.
Absolutely.
And so I definitely could have stayed there. I was definitely atheist, staunch, like, I don't know. I just don't believe it unless I see it, you know. That was my journey out.
It's totally understandable. And I think I've kind of gone, in between too, where I'm like, well, God is definitely a name for something, but not this image that I had created, because of the teachings of the Mormon church. Like, God, could be like, I hate even using, I think you mentioned that. Yeah,
energy. It could be
energy. I mean, source energy, your higher self. There's so many names. This is an analogy I love to use. have you ever played the cloud game where you pick a cloud and you like, oh, that looks like a bunny, like, or that one looks like a train. That one. Yeah. So like, let's say you get a cloud and someone's like, that's a cactus, and someone's like, no, it's an octopus. It's like you're both looking at a cloud. You have different names for it. It's still a cloud, right? So I do believe that there is something, you know, because I've had experiences since leaving the church that have really resonated with me, and they've been mine. They haven't been somebody else's. Yeah. So I do believe there is something. There's like a million different variations of how people can describe this thing or believe in this thing. But even atheism is a belief in something. It's a belief in nothing. So I think that there's nothing wrong. I'm not saying that atheists are wrong necessarily. Like we all have just different versions of what is. And it's been kind of weird to land in that space though, because I went from it is this way and there is no other way and everyone else is wrong to being like, maybe we're all fucking right. I know.
What an idea, you know. But it is. Since I've left, I've really liked this quote. Like, the more you think you know, the less you know, you know?
The more I learn, the less I know.
The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. It's just, that's how it goes. Because, there could be a million explanations for it. Yeah. And so,
we live in a universe of infinite possibilities.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and science even changes all the time. Like, they scientifically, like, things change too because we learn more, or, you know, the universe is expanding. There's just so much we don't know, and we can take what feels right and go in that direction. Yeah. But for sure, it's been a process.
And I think that's why I have a hard time being around anybody that's like polarized in any shape or form now, whether it be politics, whether it be, you know, any idea that we have. Even, you know, this is the best. I just can't get on board with that anymore because I'm like, how do you know? You don't know that. And that's just your upbringing, your viewpoint. And so, absolutely. I'm very attracted to people who are open-minded and willing to accept that they could be wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, so along the way, what are some things that you have found that have kind of helped you? Maybe books, messages, ideas. What are some things that you've adopted along the way?
So the first book, well, actually I read, I shouldn't. I was going to say I read A Course in Miracles. I read parts of A Course in Miracles, which kind of was a good transition for me because it kind of kept me in the, like, I couldn't let go of Jesus at that point yet. And so A Course in Miracles kind of helped me integrate a little bit different beliefs, but still like keep that hope in Jesus.
So what is that book about? I've never read it.
You know, it's basically like, this is what Jesus meant by what he said, and different messages from his teachings, like not necessarily from the Bible. And it kind of goes along with like spiritualism and mysticism and law of attraction type stuff in a way. But don't like super quote me on that because it was like at least 3 years ago and I only read parts of it. But I remember a lot of things resonating and it just kind of helping me in that gray area. And then I read a book called The Seat of the Soul by Gary Zukav. I mean, it talked about karma. It talked about soul, family. It just really broke everything down in a way that made sense to me. And since then, like, I've had some moments or times of like, maybe I don't subscribe to that. Maybe I don't know if that's really how it is. But the general message of it and understanding of it was really good for me. It really like helped set kind of a spiritual foundation.
So that one talked about past life or past lives?
Oh, yeah. It talked about past lives. It talked about karma and like what it is and how it works. Because growing up, you think karma is just like you do something bad's going to happen back to you. But it's so much deeper than that. I mean, it's so much more like spiritually advanced than that. And it's very, relevant in all areas of your life. And it talked about soul families, and it talked about, the ego and higher self. And I think it was from this book. I think there was a, what is it called? Where where Jesus teaches in parables.
Yeah.
There's like a parable where he's like, if you're having a hard time understanding how God can express himself through so many ways, but so be individual, but also one. He's like, take the ocean, for example. If you take a cup and you take a cup of water out of the ocean, that's still part of the ocean, but yet it's its own entity. And I was like, wow, that's deep.
Oh, it's so interesting that you talked about that because in a mushroom trip that I did with somebody, that was a truth that they pulled out. They just said it out loud. They're like, oh, but we're just like you said it. We're all part of the same thing, but we each have our own individuality, even though we're all made of the same source. So I love that.
Thanks.
Yeah. And that was kind of the first thing that I found too. Actually, there was 2 books that I really enjoyed. When I left, I had a group of, was there 4 of us, 5 of us girls that we had started talking about the problems we were having in the church and our feelings about it. And
I love that.
Thank the Lord or higher self or whatever that I had these ladies because damn, we needed each other. Yeah. We'd get together every Friday and we would just talk about the shit that we were finding out and we would deconstruct together. We would laugh together. We would cry together. I mean, one of them recommended that I read this book and it was from a person named Carolyn Myss. I think it's Myss. Damn it, I should have looked that up. She's somebody who can diagnose different illnesses with, just herself because she's kind of a psychic medium, right? Yeah. And so as I was leaving and I was starting to become like, okay, maybe I should be open to certain ideas and let's see how I feel about them. I'm not going to buy any stock in them. I'm going to just weigh them out. Be open to it. And reading one of her books, I think Energy Anatomy, one of the things that stuck out was that we are all part of this community. She talks a lot about this and that kind of our responsibility is to find our way out of it. Not very many people do it. 7% of people can find their way out of a community. And the reason that's so hard is because when we are in a community, we are physically safe. This goes back to our primal era where if you were in this group, right, and we were all cavemen and you left the group, you could be physically in danger if you went against what they said. So we have that same primal instinct now to stay in this groupthink. And groupthink can be anything. It can be religion. It can be your family. It can be
politics.
Yeah, politics. Even just cultural ideals like the fact that in the United States, women are seen as less beautiful as they age, where that's in Europe, it's different, So finding your way out of community was an important thing to do because then you can start thinking for yourself. And then that's where you can start discovering real truth. Because if you can't learn how to trust your higher self and learn how to access that, then you're never going to have your own conviction of yourself. Whatever you learn, if you're not out of the community, is going to be somebody else's idea. And that's literally how we grow, is by having our own ideas and being able to tap into that and grow from there. And hearing that message, I don't know, it was really, really helpful because I'm like, okay, yes, I have left that particular community, but okay, what other ideals do I have in my life that aren't mine?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. I'm so still sorting through that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a life ongoing process there.
Right.
But it did help me to have more hope in this connection with my higher self because I wasn't there yet. I still didn't trust anything. I still didn't know what to believe, but it was kind of, it planted a seed. Okay, maybe we do have powers, upward. Yeah. And then the second book that really changed my view on possibilities would be something called Messages from Masters. And I have a friend who is a psychic medium, and we've had really insane experiences where she knew things that she could not have known, like my grandma's nickname, my grandma's nickname for me, Crazy. And so I'm not trying to convince everyone of it, but for me,
that's your experience.
Yeah, this is my experience. And it helped me to kind of trust her opinion. And so when she recommended this book, Messages from Masters, it's another one that talks about past lives. It's about the psychologist who hypnotizes this one girl. He's very science-minded. but she's like severe anxiety, sleeping in her closet, can't fly, but, just not functioning in life. And he tries to take her back to these points in her, and not in her life, just in her regular life about, where her trauma happened. And it wasn't changing her. And eventually he takes her back into her past life. And she starts talking about, in 1500 AD, I'm holding my baby and I'm looking around, it's Egypt. And anyway, through the process, it takes a good year before he even starts believing what's happening. And then, it's something that he starts doing with other people. And just the lessons that I learned from that, there was a time where she had died in the visualization and she was at the in-between place. And in this in-between place, she would review her life. And at that moment, I was driving in the car and I remember having this out-of-body experience, like the master in that space was talking to me. And again, I'm not in a place where I'm like really trusting my feelings, but I'm like, wow, okay, well, you know what? I can go to a place where I can have hope. I can have hope. Yeah. I'm not going to base my entire life around it, but it does kind of give me hope that there's purpose here and that this isn't the end and that, that there's a greater plan.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that so much. So what have you done since then that kind of helped you along the way, and where do you feel like you've landed, and what steps have helped you along the way?
Okay. So again, we're going to have very different stories on this.
Yeah.
And, I'm probably going to be talking about some personal things here, but very much what I needed to have happen was this experimenting process. And I saw a YouTube video that was talking about Friedrich Nietzsche, I think that's how you say his name, how some of his ideas about finding yourself and your purpose. And one of the biggest ones that he has on there is that you have to experiment, you have to try temptations, you have to see so that you can develop this sense of self. And it's very much been that way for me. And I think that in my marriage, I think that's why I never could find myself, because I didn't have the freedom to explore. And it can be anything. It can be sexually. It can be with different substances. It can be in different relationships, in different situations. And I've had to go through it all to find out what I'm not and what I am. It's something that has to happen so you can learn to trust your sense of self. And for me, especially, especially dating. Dating has really helped shine a light on a lot of my traumas from my childhood, because it really brought up my anxious attachment and realized I've had this my whole life, and it's been really an energy block for me. And so it's helped me to find ways to heal that. And my conversations and different ways that people that I've dated have taught me to communicate, just things that I'm learning from people. And then, experimenting with even in my sex life, what do I like? What types of boundaries am I going to draw for myself? Am I going to honor those boundaries? And what type of person am I in that sense? A lot of experimenting there, and especially with different substances like mushrooms. I know we say this in about every podcast now, but mushrooms have changed my life. And I would say they are what have been instrumental in me arriving at the viewpoints that I have now. And again, it's always progressing. But from the very first moment that I tried it, when I went in the very first time, I found my center and I found my purpose, which is to help people. And it also helped me start developing this thing that's always been there. I realized it's always been there, but this sense of helping to see people's traumas. I work as a massage therapist, and I realize I've always been able to see this, but now I'm like developing it through the use of psilocybin in these ceremonies where it's helping me to understand humanity and like the process of healing trauma. And my place in the universe with all of it. It's really opened my eyes to what it means to access your higher power, what that looks like, what the possibilities are for healing in that way. And I mean, I'm so grateful for these experiences. And I know I know a lot of people have done mushrooms, but not a ton of people I found have done mushrooms as a therapy. And, I do it at least once a month to go and, okay, I'm going to focus on this now. And, there may or may not be a God out there. I don't know. I don't know if there's a higher energy. And the one thing that I've come away with, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because we have this power to heal and access truth in ourselves. And that I can rely on, that I can get on board with because I felt it.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of where I'm at. There may or may not be a God. I don't know. I'm not going to bet the bank on it. Bet the farm. I'm not going to bet the farm. I said the wrong analogy. I think that's where I'm at. What about you?
Real quick, there's a show. Well, I was going to say series. I don't think it's a series, but there's an episode. Whatever. Real quick, there's something on Netflix called How to Change Your Mind, and it talks about psychedelics. So you should watch it. As always, like when we talk about psychedelics, do your research, proceed, responsibly. For me, my journey has kind of been all over the place. So I started out pretty strong, like I mentioned, thinking that I, had all the new answers, and this was it. And then really going through a struggle. And most recently, I feel like I have kind of gone through a dark night of the soul, if you will. I've gone through a very deep depression, and it has been debilitating in a way. And like full disclosure, I ended up in the hospital because I had gotten to a point where I literally just did not know how I could live this life anymore and how I could do this. And I knew that I had gotten to a place where I needed help. I needed a lot of help. And it was really interesting because the psychiatrist that came in and saw me, he was asking me questions, and he's like, and I had told him, just like a really, really like Cliff Notes version of my story. And he was like, so what have you done since you left your religion? And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, did you replace it with something? Is there a practice that you do every day? Is there something that he's like, some people find it in, he said some people leave and they become Christians. Some people leave and they become atheists. He's like, and that's where I got that, like atheism is a belief, right? He's like, some people find it in psychedelics. Some people find it in, so I thought it was interesting that the psychiatrist said people find their purpose in psychedelics. They find their purpose in this. They find, where have you found your purpose? And I was just like, I don't know. I thought that I had like a spiritual foundation when I left, but there was just so much, I think, that was lodged in my subconscious and in my energetic body, like as far as trauma goes, that I wasn't really properly working through. And so I started to do the work again. And this is like fairly recent where I started to do the work again. I started really setting up routines or just honoring myself by listening to things that light me up. And for me, it is spirituality and mysticism and the law of attraction and all of that good stuff. I realized this is my path. This is what makes sense to me. It's what resonates with me. It's how I feel like I expand and grow spiritually. And so I started doing that again. And it's just been really like, it's kind of like breathed life into me again. And so if any of you are struggling out there, I mean, I am a firm believer in both psychology and spirituality. I feel like they mirror each other a lot. Mm-hmm. They really do. You talk about the subconscious mind and beliefs and trauma and how it can and does contribute to such a broad spectrum of mental illnesses and struggles like depression and high anxiety and overeating and addictions and just so much. Like there's a root cause of that. And spiritually, that it talks a lot about shadow work. And that's a lot of what it is those traumas. And some of those traumas aren't even yours. Like you are inherited, like you inherit those, like ancestral trauma is a thing. And just all of that, understanding myself, my mind, both from a psychological perspective and from a spiritual perspective has helped me so much. And it's still very much a process that I'm still figuring out, but I know that I am doing the work, and it's work. It's hard work. It's hard to sit in those feelings. It's hard to really be in that space. But once you have the tools to sit in that space and have grace with yourself and slowly replace those beliefs with new ones, it really is life-changing. And, I don't know like where you are at personally, any of you watching. And we're not here to say, we found this after Mormon religion and this is what it is. We wanted to talk about how our experiences looked a little different from each other. We found something that resonates with us. And if you're in that space, like keep holding on, like keep moving forward and find what feels right to you and thrive there, because you can still thrive. You can still be happy. And there might be a period of time where it really fucking sucks and it's hard as hell, but you can find that place where that's your place. That's you. That
resonates. Yeah,
it resonates. So that's all.
Amen.
Can I get an amen?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I really am so happy that we've headed in this direction. Just the different experiences, again, have been so vastly different, but we're both kind of heading in that direction. And we want to talk more about it. This is what we want to do. This is where we're resonating. This is where we're thriving right now. And we really do hope that it helps some of you. So if you are watching on YouTube, make sure you have clicked that subscribe button. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you are listening to us. We want to keep talking about this and we would love your support. We also have links below where you can donate to this program so that
we can keep going.
And I can keep going. Please. Okay. All right. We'll see you in the next video.
Bye.